every year in the 13th century in the land of Israel. In the year 1200, the crusaders ruled the land of Israel, mainly in the shore area, while the Muslim Ayyubis were ruling the mountain area. This continued also to the next year. In the year 1202, there was a big earthquake that hit mainly the areas of Akkor and Tyre and caused famine and disease in the land. In the next year, the situation continued. In the year 1204, the Rambam, the Maimonides, passed away, and his son Avraham continued his position as the Nagid, the leader of the Jews in Israel and Egypt. The bones of the Rambam were brought to the city Tiberias. In the same year, there was a truce between the Crusaders and the Muslims, and it was extended to another 6 years. The situation continued to the next year, 1205, 1206, and 1207, and 1208. In the year 1209, there is the Aliyah, the immigration of 300 rabbis from England and France. 300 rabbis, their families, and their students, they are coming to the land of Israel under the approval of the Crusaders. Many of them came from England and France because of anti-Semitic and Christian oppressions, but also because of Zionist religious ideology, and also with inspiration of their project, which is the Baalei Tosafot, and which is a project which objective is to commentary of Rashi's commentary for 30 chapters, very important chapters of the Babylonian Talmud. This was a very extraordinary event because it means that basically the most important rabbis in the world of Jews at that time came to the land of Israel in exactly the same time that is conquered by the Crusaders. And salvation looks so far. This mark basically the end of Jewry is based in the land of Israel and also Babylonia or Egypt, but this is basically mark how Sepharadic and Ashkenazi Jewry became the dominant in the world of Jews. Those Jews were exiled 1,000 years before that from Judea to Europe, and now they're coming back. In the next year, in the year 1210, the same Jews we were talking about before, they were led by two rabbis. One of them is Rabbi Shimon of Shans, and the other one is Rabbi Yonatan the Kohen from Lunel. And as I said before, they were oppressed in Europe, influenced by the Crusaders. And the other reason was that the Muslim liberated Jerusalem from the Crusaders, and they allowed the Jews to live in the city as opposed to the Crusaders. So many Jews wanted to use the opportunity to live in Jerusalem. And let's see. Those two rabbis were good friends of the Rambam, even though they didn't agree with him most of the time. At the same time, Rabbi Shmuel ben Shimon come to the land of Israel together with Rabbi Yonatan, the Kohen from Lunel. According to what he's saying, there was a Jewish community in Safed, in North Israel, and they had a synagogue over there. He's also saying that there was another synagogue that was built by Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. He's saying that there was one Jewish painter in Hebron that assisted them to enter the Machpelah cave, which is the second holiest place for Jews. In Jerusalem, they prayed in the western part of the Temple Mount. They also mentioned that there was a purification pool for Kohanim on top of the mountain. At the same time, the Crusaders were ruled by the French knight Jean Bermillon, which means that they also ruled Cyprus at the same time. That's because the children of the kings were too young to rule. And when he came to Akkor, the Jews accepted him with the Book of Torah. The next year, 1211, a synagogue on the name of Rabbi Saadia ben Yemini was built in Jerusalem. And at the same time, the Jews in Jerusalem became into a debt to the Valley of Jerusalem because they borrowed some money to create that synagogue, and the Jews of Alexandria volunteered to pay their debt. In that time, there was Aliyah, Jewish immigration of Jews from Spain to the land, alongside a stream of pilgrims coming from Spain to the land, among them very important Jews like Rabbi Yeshayahu de Trani and Rabbi Shem Tov ben Yitzchak of Tortosa. And the year 12 was one. About the same time, there were some Jews that were complaining against the Nagid, Rabbi Avraham, son of the Maimonides, which was influenced by Muslim Sufi philosophy. And people complained that he is trying to implement elements from Islam as if they were ancient Jewish traditions that were abandoned over time, like spiritual purification pools and night prayers. They say that also he tried to change the decoration of the synagogue so people will sit on pillows instead of sitting on chairs. And then he tried to implement more bowing, similar to Muslims. The Jews complained to the Sultan al-Malik al-Adal because according to the law, non-Muslims were not allowed to make any changes in their religion, and Abraham had to change his project. Let's see, we hear that Rabbi Abraham met with some French Jews in Israel, like Rabbi Yosef ben Baruch Miklisson and his brother Rabbi Meir. The next year, 1214, the situation continued. We hear in the 1214 that the Jewish community of Bilbis in Lebanon make a big donation to the Jews in Jerusalem. We can understand that Rabbi Eliyahu ben Aknin was the leader of the Jews of Jerusalem at that time. Situation continued the next 3 years until 1218, when Rabbi Yehuda el-Kharizi, the famous poet from Spain, is visiting the land of Israel. He described that there are 3 communities in Jerusalem. One was the Ashkenazi Jews. One of them was Rabbi Sa'adi ben Yemini. And then he says that there are French, and then there are Sephardim. The head of the Jews from France was Rabbi Yosef ben Rabbi Baruch, and then the head of the Jews from Spain and North Africa, which were called Ma'aravim, was Rabbi Eliyahu Ma'aravi. In Akko, he find many Jews from France and England. And he says that in Safed, he met a descendant of one of the heads of the Yeshivat Gaon Yaakov, which were the dominant yeshiva in the Arab period. His name was Rabbi Tzadok Tzadik. About the same time, the crusaders were fighting against the Muslims in the mountain area without getting a lot of results. The same next year, 1219, the crusaders attack Egypt. And because of that, the Muslims that ruled the mountain area, they destroyed the walls of the city of Jerusalem. And because of that, the residents, Muslims and Jews, gathered in the Temple Mount and yelled, and they cried, and they tear off their hairs. Many residents left their property and moved to Transjordan, to Syria. And let's see what happened after that. In the year 1220, the Muslims conquered the city Caesarea, which is on the shore. It's a very important port city. And they tried to conquer Atlit, and then the Ayubim destroyed the city of Jerusalem in order to prevent the Crusaders from conquering it. At that time, all the Jews escaped the city, probably to Acre. The next year, in the year 1221, Rabbi Yitzchak ben Baruch Tzarfati re-established the Jewish community in Jerusalem 1 year after they ran away. And the end of this year, the Muslims and the Christians get to an agreement for 8 years of no war. In 1222, and let's see, we have Rabbi Yitzchak ben Baruch Tzarfati saying that the Jewish community was very small, that even a small argument between them brought Rabbi Shlomo to talk to the Muslim judge in order to decide who is right and who is wrong. We can also understand from those kind of arguments that money that was donated from the Jews of Egypt to build a mikveh, a purification pool, that money was brought, but it was detained because they were fighting where to use it. So we can understand from this complaint that we have documentation of it, is that the Muslims didn't allow the Jews to enter the Shiloh pool. And this situation continued to the next few years, 1225, 1226, 1227. 1227, the Muslims destroyed Jerusalem again, so it won't fall to the crusaders, and also all the forts in the Galilee, among them Safed. Next year, the same thing. Next year, 1229, Jerusalem moved to the hands of the Christians according to the agreement, and the ban on the dwelling of Jews in Jerusalem is once again ratified, so Jews have to leave the city again. Let's see. At that time, this agreement was not because of some crusade victory, but because the Ayyubid princes were fighting who's going to control Egypt and Syria. The ruler of Egypt didn't want to fight against his brother, rulers of Syria and Israel, and also against the crusaders, which were led by the German Emperor Friedrich II. So he agreed to give him Jerusalem. Friedrich II, the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, declared himself the king of Jerusalem, out of marriage to the daughter of Jean ben de Berin, the king of the crusaders. Friedrich achieved the objectives of the crusade without even actually fighting, even though he was completely disarray with other crusaders. And because the Pope and also the crusade nobility declared upon him, because of his feudal claims on their expenses, all his military activities can be summoned with the fast conqueror of the city Jaffa. Let's see. This situation continued until the year 1233. We have Rabbi Yosef ben Gershom, which is a famous French sage. He leaves Egypt and settled in Akko in North Israel. He came to Egypt before that, when the Jews were expelled from Jerusalem in 1229, and from there he moved to Akko. It says that he moved to Akko because it was a part of an argument between the Jews about probably the Rambam. He said that there was some Jew named Rabbi Hodaya ben Ishia, which was the Rosh Gola. He came to Alexandria and immediately demanded to be the leader of the community. The French sages opposed this proclamation, and there were arguments between the French Jews and the Sapharadi Jews. The Nagid, Avraham ben Maimonides, also opposed this proclamation because the Nasi position lost its real authority a long time ago. Okay, in the next year, 1234, the community of Akko is is flourishing, and basically they become the dominant. So the Jewish community of Akko became the dominant all over the world, and it becomes that you will need the agreement of 3 sages from Akko in order to ban a Jew from the community. Next year, the situation continued. The next year, 1236, the Jews accept permission to have one Jewish house in Jerusalem that will be like an innery for pilgrims, and the manager or owner of this house will be a painter. Apparently, at that time, painting or dyeing, I would say, maybe dyeing is the correct word, was done mainly by Jews. So even the crusaders, they allow some Jews to stay as long as they are dyers. This approval came thanks to the advocate of one Jew from Tiberias, which was in good connection with the crusaders. But we don't have this name because it was lost. In 1237, we have Rabbi Avraham, son of Maimonides, died. His son David, which is grandson of the Maimonides, continued as the Nagid, the leader of the Jews in Egypt and in the land of Israel and Syria. Avraham had another son named Ovadia that lived until 1265. In the next year, Rabbi 1238, Rabbi Yaakov Israeli, the messenger of Rabbi Yechanan of Paris from the Bat Safot, is visiting the land of Israel and writing a guide for the pilgrim, in which he explained in details all the holy locations and the graves of the sages. The next year, 1239, the Muslims conquered Jerusalem and expelled the Franks out of there, violating the agreement that they had. When the Egyptians conquering the city from the Syrians, they returned it to the Crusaders. Next year, the same thing, 1241, the Crusaders are signing an agreement with Egypt in exchange for territories in the land, and they took control over the Galilee. But there was a split among the Crusaders, and some of them wanted to peace with Syria, but not with Egypt. When the Crusaders double-crossed the Egyptians, the Sultan of Egypt called the Haramizim to fight alongside with him. The Haramizim were of a Muslim kingdom in Central Asia, near the Caspian Sea, that was completely destroyed by the Mongols in the 40s, and their brigades or garrisons were basically spread up among the Middle East, basically, and doing whatever they want. Situation continued the next year. In 1243, Conrad, the son of Friedrich of Germany, became the king of the Crusaders, even though he's not in the land. Next year, 1244, the Haramizim invade the land. Because of the Haramizim, the Crusaders abandoned Jerusalem, and most of them being slaughtered around it. In the end of the same year, there is a battle near Ashkelon and Gaza between the Crusaders and the Syrians to the Egyptians and the Haramizim, in which the Crusaders are defeated completely. And because of that, the Egyptians can take control of most of the land, and in exception of a small shore area that's still controlled by the Crusaders. When the Muslims controlled Jerusalem, the Jews returned to it. The next year, situation continued. The Jews of the city Tyre returned to live to the city under Venetians' authority. We can learn the family name of those Jews because it's written in the Venetian approval paper. It says Daniel, Shimon, David, Moshe, Simon, Machmar, Ava, Machva, Barachi. Those are the family names. The year 1246, the Haramizim conquered Jerusalem. The next year, Tiberias and Ashkelon conquered by the Egyptians. The Egyptians controlled Jerusalem. In 1248, we have the 7 crusades leaving from Europe and trying to conquer Egypt with not a lot of success. The same time, the ruler of the city Karch in Transjordan conquered Jerusalem. But after a few months, the Egyptians control the city again. The city moved from one hand to another, affect the Jewish community over there, and from 1244, so basically at that time there's no Jewish community in that city. The situation continued the next year in 1250. 1250, the city Akko is the Jewish community in city Akko became the biggest Jewish city. Because it was still not harmed by the Muslims, it was rapidly safe. And also the crusaders, they needed the Jews as doctors and also as physicians, and also, as we said before, as dyers. So they let them prosper. One of the consequences of the Akko community was the use of Hebrew rather than Aramaic or Arabic, which was very odd in the middle of the 13th century. Anyhow, in the same year, the Mamluks, they killed the Ayyubi Egyptian king and they take control of Egypt. The Mamluk were soldiers that were recruited by abduction of children from Turkish tribes in the center of Asia and converting them to Islam from childhood and training them to be soldiers loyal to Islam. This started the battle between Mamluk Egypt to Ayyubic Syria, in which the crusaders support the Mamluks. This situation continued. 1254, Conradin became the king of the crusaders, even though he's not in the land. Same year, the ruler of Damascus controlled Jerusalem. Situation continued. Next year, 1257, Rabbi Yichel of Paris, leaders of the Baalet Tosafot, which already came to the land, comes to the land, but his ship drowns in the sea. His son Jacob come to Akko and lead the Jewish community over there. A very big synagogue was established, which was called Bet Midrash de Paris. This situation continued the next year. 1260, the Mongols invade the land. After they conquer Iraq and Syria, they are being stopped by the Mamluks in En Kharod by the leadership of Bibiris. The same year, Bibiris assassinated the Sultan and declared himself the Sultan and Caliph. When the Mamluk invade the land of Israel, they reach Jerusalem and its Jews ran away. Most of them are being slaughtered by the Mongols. Looks like they managed to run away and also smuggle the Torah scrolls to Nablus. From this year, basically, you can say that the Crusade period, at least from the Jewish point of view, is ended. But Akko is still the most important Jewish community in the land of Israel, is still under Crusade control. So it's kind of like split, kind of like on the gray area. And Bibiris, the leader of the Mamluks, destroyed every crusade fort that he conquered. In the middle of the land, he left a few small forts to guard the area, far enough from the sea. Along the shore, he completely destroyed the port cities and the shore cities except Gaza. He wanted to make it impossible for future crusade to occur because there won't be any fortified port cities to mechanize the crusade invasion. So he also blocked and destroyed the ports. This is how the shore area of Israel became abandoned, desolated, and full of swamps and robbers and leeches. At the same time, Rabbi Abulafia comes to the land. As soon as he landed in Akko, he's been notified about what happened with Jerusalem, with the Mongols, and he returned to Italy. He was a famous Kabbalist, the famous Kabbalah. One of his students stayed in the city, became one of its most famous of its sages. Next year, the year 1261, the same time, the Mamluk declared that everybody that lives in Egypt must accept Islam. David, the Nagid, the grandson of the Rambam, succeeded to convince the Egyptians to to stop this verdict, and they paid a very big sum of money in order to cancel that verdict. So this way the Jews of Egypt and also the Jews of Israel were saved. This situation continued. 1265 Tiberius conquered Caesarea, Arsuf, and Atlit. Next year, 1266 Tiberius prevent the Jews and Christians to pray in the Machpelah cave in Hebron, the second holy city for the Jews. We don't understand exactly why, but this ban was observed until the Ottoman period, until the end of the Ottoman period. 1267, the Rambam, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, come to the land of Israel from Spain. He is the famous rabbi that from the Barcelona disputation. He reports and writes that the land is desolated in most of it, especially in Jerusalem and Judea. He says that fearing the Mongols, most of the Muslims left the land in Syria and the Jews moved to Akko. It is important to notice that Fabri that come to the land 200 years later describe basically the same thing, that the land could be fertile if there was someone to fertilize it. In Europe, the Rambam combined Ashkenazi and Sepharadi traditions on his commentary on the Torah and Talmud. He ran away from Spain, from Barcelona, because he defeated the Christians in the disputation in 1263, and because of that he had to leave the city. When he came to Jerusalem, he visited the holy places and he gathered all the Jewish communities. Okay. Visit all the holy cities and he gathered all the Jewish communities, the Jewish community in Jerusalem, together with pilgrims and olim from France and North Africa. And he established the Jewish quarter, the Jewish synagogue in the Jewish quarter. He brings the Torah scroll from Nablus, and he united the community in the house of the Jewish dyers that were gathered there in Saturdays. Jews from all over the land, Syria and Egypt as well, start to pilgrim to that synagogue that the Ramban established. Next, till 1268, Tiberius conquered Safed, the Galilee, and Jaffa from the Crusaders. He also conquered the Antioch princes at the same time. A crusade comes out of Europe against Tiberius, invade Tunisia, but failed there. Situation continued. 1270, the Rambam moves to Acre and died there after a few months. The next year, the year 1271, one of the most important disciples of the Ramban, Rabbi Yitzhak ben Shimon of Acre, that lived until 1350, had a very interesting theory to the age of the world. He says that the world creation is being measured with divine years and not human years, and every divine day is like 1,000 human years. So a human year is 365,250 human years. Based on the book of the picture, which was written in the 1st century, we are in the Shabbatic year, the 6th Shabbatic year, and every Shabbatic year is 7,000 years, meaning that until now it passed 42,000 divine years, which are 42,000 multiplied 365,250 equals to 50 billion human years. Okay, interesting. Next year, 1272, 1273, 1274, 1275, the same time, the Rambam, one of these disciples, write the book El Masot, which describes the visit in the land of Israel. And the writer leaves Akko, and he visited the synagogue named after Eliyahu Navi in Haifa. Currently, there was a synagogue in Haifa at the same time, and also in the altar of Eliyahu. He moves into Usha and Shfaram, Tzipori, and Kfar Hananel, which are in the Galilee. And he visits every area, and then he comes back, which shows that the roads are not so safe. From Akko, he comes all the way to Nablus, and from there he moved to Megiddo, Tanakh in Israel, which is in the Galilee. In Nablus, he argued with the Samaritan while he was there in the Shabbat. He comes to Jerusalem and traditionally behaved like with all the Jerusalem traditions of mourning. He walked from Scope Mountain to the Temple Mount, which sits on the ruins of the Jewish temple. He visited the Shiloh pool, Jehoshaphat Valley, Gai Beinom, and Mount Olives. And he said that there was still the big stone that the Gaon was standing during the Arab period. He comes to the graves of the king of Israel in Mount Zion, from there to Temple Mountain, which he describes in details. He visits the grave of Rachel in Bethlehem, there to the Machpelah cave in Hebron, also in Chalchul, grave of Samuel in Ramah. From there he goes back to the Samaria and visits the grave of Joshua and in Timnath Nach. From there he gets back to Akko. From Akko he comes again to the Galilee. He visits the graves of the Tzaddikim in Meron, Ford, Gush Chalev, Kfar Beram, where he found a very big and nice synagogue. He moves to other Jewish towns in the area like Alma, Delta, Amoka, En Zeitim, Faram, Kiyuma, Nevartin, Tzfat, and Tiberias. He visits the graves of the Rambam in Paris, also after that in Yakuk, Achbar, Kfar Chitin, Arbel, Araba, Sachnin, Kfar Kara, Romesh, Galil, also Kfar Manda. All are Jewish towns, which are, most of them today are Arab towns. He emphasized the importance of the relation between the land of Israel to the people of Israel. Okay, this situation continue. In the year 1280, the situation of the Jews in Akko comes to its prime because of many sages from France, Ashkenazi, and Spain and Egypt in that flourishing crusade city. Rabbi Shmuel Aderet says that it is the custom in the land of Israel and Babylonia, if there is a question, everybody everybody's answer. Let's ask the wise people of Akko first. The next 2 years, in the year 1282, there is an argument in Akko. The French Jews, among them Rabbi Shmuel, the French, the Petit, is called Petit in order to distinguish him from his father, which has the same name. They don't like the letters of the Rambam, and because of that, the Ashkenazi Rabbi posed a ban on his writing, which caused problem with the Jews of Safed and Jews in Damascus, and basically the rabbis of the Jews in Damascus, Rabbi Yishai ben Chizkiah, they post a ban on all the supporters of Rabbi Shlomo. One of the most important books of the Rambam was Moreh Nevuchim, a guide for the Moreh Nevuchim. Okay, it's a guide for Judaism basically, but people says that some people didn't like it because it's influenced by Islam. We must remember that the Rambam ran away from oppression in Islam, and actually he had to convert to Islam for some short time just in order to get by. When he ran away from Spain, he got back to be a Jew. At the same time, you have many Jewish communities in France and Ashkenaz, in Germany, that prefer to die rather than convert to Christianity. So there is some people that had a chip on their shoulders when it comes to the Rambam. Someone that just a few years ago was a Muslim and right now he's considered to be a very important sage, or used to be such a very important sage. Some people didn't like it. Let's see what's going on with this. The next year in 1288, the leader of the Jews in the city Tyre in North Israel, today it's in Lebanon, the leader Rabbi Shmuel Rofe, he died from an accident The nobles of the city were walking in order to accept the king of Jerusalem and Cyprus, and a big cross fell on his head because he bumped in the priest that was walking in front of him with a big cross. Next year, 1285, David, the grandson of the Rambam, comes to Akko. It seems like he moved to Akko from Egypt because some of his opposers caused him some problems in the court, and because of that he had to leave. It seems like Clown, the sultan that ruled after Baberis, removed David from the position of the head of the Jews while David was in the land of Israel. He defended the name of his father and his grandfather and the name of his books, and he fought the ban that the Akko sages imposed on the book Moreh Nevuchim. 1286, the same time, there was a big Jewish movement of Jews in Germany, led by Rabbi Meir of Rothenburg. And they wanted to come to the land of Israel. They came all the way to Italy, but the emperor of Germany arrested him and declared all the Jews in his kingdom are his property. Because of that, many of the Jews they got back to their houses instead of going to the land of Israel, but some of them came. The next 2 years, 1286, the Tripoli princehood is conquered by the Mamluks. Same time, the rabbi of Safed was Rabbi Moshe Yehuda Cohen. The next year, 1299, the Mamluks conquer the city of Akko, the last city of the Crusaders. And the Crusaders defend this city. Most of its residents are being slaughtered or sold to slavery. Rabbi Yitzchak of Akko, which survived the conquest of the city, give a testimony that most of the Jews from the city were sold to slavery. With the fall of the city, the Crusaders evacuated the city Tyre, and the Jews of the city spread in the city. With this, the crusade occupation of the city was ended. Let's see what's happening in the next few years until the end of the century. Let's see. 1292, the Mamluks were Turkish, but they were very devoted Muslims. They were also very skilled horse riders and archmen, but they were always paranoid about a future Mongol invasion, or even worse than that, a future crusade. So for the rest of the time, they were always worried about that. And when they conquered the land from the Ayyubids, the Mongols, and the Crusaders, the Mamluk officers received from the Sultan the land, and they split among them, and they settled their soldiers to be vessels for their officers, which means that the land stopped to be one unit. It became split into small pieces of land, which were ruled by officers. All the land, basically. The land was completely deserted and neglected for the entire Mamluk period. Only 2 places in the land of Israel received some attention, Jerusalem and Gaza. And Safed didn't receive any attention, but despite that, it became a very important city during the time, despite the Mamluks completely ignoring it and not giving any resources to that, simply because it was safe. Nobody was fighting over the city too much, so it was economically safe. From the Jews' point of view, the fall of the Crusade kingdom was a good news, but they didn't like that the Jewish community of Akko was exterminated and most of its sages and residents were sold to slavery. But the Jews knew that any time a new crusade can come again, they didn't know that the Crusaders are not coming again. So they were busy in rebuilding the community again and strengthening the connection with the Jews overseas. The Jewish community in the land of Israel became completely dependent on the Jewish community of Egypt, where the leaders were sitting, the Nagid. In the land itself, there was the deputies of the Nagid in each area, and whoever led the community was usually the Parnasim, the rich Jews which were supporting the poor Jews. They were called elders. Let's see. During that time, in the Galilee, there were only 10 Jewish towns: Alma, Safed, Ein Zaitim, Beria, Kfar Hanania, Ba'am, Gush Chalev, Amoka, and Gavarta. In the year 1295, the book Sha'arei Tzion was written in Hebron by one of the disciples of Rabbi Abulafia, named Rabbi Shem Tov. And this testified to the renewal of the new Jewish community in Hebron, and also of the immigration of many Jews from Europe with deep knowledge of the mysterious Kabbalah. Torah. Okay. And the year 1300, the Mongols, led by Ghazan, invaded the land of Israel, but they retreated from it until after 5 months. They got to Jerusalem and Gaza. The Christians assisted them, hoping that with their help they're gonna renew the kingdom of Jerusalem. Deserters from the Mongol army and also Mongol refugees were allowed to live in Atlit and Gaza. A big wave of refugees that ran away from the Mongols also settled in the land. At that time, Syrians were settled in Gaza and Egypt, and Safed, and also Kurds and Turkmens. One of them is the Tamim Adari in Hebron, and also the Tadmori and Jabari. Okay.